Alright, so I'm just going to go over briefly how I create my 9-patch images for Android development. And I've already got one open here that I used on an app I'm currently using. Um, and you'll notice it's a clearly square. It's used for a multitude of things. Some rectangular, some square, all just all over the board. But you can see that there's nothing that can't be tiled here. The glow is a little probably not as good as it could be or should be. The way that Photoshop does glows, you can see that it kind of tapers off here to the corner and then kind of reappears a little bit over here and then kind of tapers down. So that's not really ideal. You'd want to keep all the patches that are going to be created as similar as possible. But if I draw these rulers in, you can kind of see what I'm thinking at this point. These aren't exact, clearly. But you have your 1, 2, 3, 4 corners, and then the pixel data between here and here is pretty much the same. It might be a little bit different here than it is here, than it is here. All things considered, it'll work. Once we go into the Draw 9-patch utility that comes with the Android SDK, that won't really matter as much. So once I have all this drawn up, you can do whatever you want. I've got some auto glows and drop, stuff and strokes and kind of a jelly gradient thing going on here. And as long as your borders are clean, you're okay. So go ahead and save this. I'll save it on the desktop for now. I'll just call it 2-patch. Come to our command and do Draw 9-patch, and that is set in the environment variable, the environment path variable, pointing towards your Android SDK where you have your tools and your emulator and all your Android development files. So we're going to open up that patch, that image rather, and you can see this is a little large. Ideally, I'd want to keep these down around 50 or so, but for example's sake, it'll do just fine. Oh, one thing I didn't do, the background here needs to be transparent. It's not going to make much sense if you have, an already defined background on your image. I just did that to show you that there is, in fact, a glow. So we'll go ahead and trash that, and while we're at it, we'll go ahead and resize this down to 50 by 50. Ideally, you'd want to create these at that resolution to make sure that your resampling doesn't affect your borders or anything like that. But for this, it'll be fine. 2-patch, yes, okay. Go back to 9-patch. We're going to just reopen this, and you can see at 100%, it's much better. It's much easier to work with. So the top and left is going to be the tileable areas. So this is going to where you're going to want to draw which pixels you want to have stretched across or down. So if we come in here and we scale this up, it's just hideous. It's disgusting. It's scaling everything as if it were one big patch, which doesn't make any sense at this point. So we'll go ahead and find a central vertical here that's going to be the same throughout. And same thing over here. Now in this case, there's a couple things we need to worry about. We need to worry about whether or not we want this to tile, the top shiny part, just the center, and anything in the bottom. Because we have a gradient here, that stops about right here or so. We have, of course, this here, which we don't really want to stretch. And then we have this kind of bottom lighter color. So in this case, I'm just going to throw a pixel right here. And you can see that automatically, immediately, it's stretching out just fine. We could come in here and draw a few more pixels, but as you can see, due to the nature of the PNGs and being 8-bit and the stretching that's needed to put these into use, they're not working so well. If you know that your images are going to be tiled or wider than they are tall, let's say you're only going to be using them on single line buttons or text views or something like that, you can see here that this is looking pretty good. But once you get really tall here, and the same goes for the horizontal stuff, if I start, well, there's really nothing here that's different throughout, but let's say I had some sort of different gradient in here, and if I were to tile this way, then this would get really, really chunky. So you got to keep that in mind as well. But for now, we're just going to do the 1. And the right and bottom side is where you're going to put your content. So in this case, I can put the content, that spans the whole thing here. That's not really a big deal. And I'm going to want to keep a little bit of padding here on the sides. So I'm going to go right there. Show my patches, see if there's any bad patches. There are none. Show my content area. And in this case, I think I can probably bring this up a little bit more. Maybe not that much. And this always looks better. The way that the text is laid out in text views and buttons and, I'm sure a couple other widgets, in my experience, it's been best to leave a little bit of extra padding than you normally would on these, because the layout can get a little bit cramped. But that's pretty much it for now. Let's go and import this into Eclipse. We'll save it out. We'll just save on the desktop again as NinePatch final. Go and exit out, minimize this. Alright. So in Eclipse I have a little bit set up already. Just your average run-of-the-mill, auto-generated activity. And then inside main.xml I'll have 2 buttons. One that I'm just going to leave plain, and the other one I'm going to apply our NinePatch to. So if I go ahead and run this on the emulator, you can see that we have the standard stock button boring yawner right here, right? So let's go ahead and come back here and to our NinePatch button. And we'll call this NinePatch final. This is going to complain because we haven't actually imported this into a project yet. So go ahead and do that. That's from the previous one that I didn't like. Okay. So we're going to refresh our drawable, and there it goes away. So we're going to run this again. And there we have it. Clearly the text could be changed, and we'll go ahead and darken the background here to like 222, and we'll do our Android text color. I'll make it light. So when we run this again, we have a very nice stretching, tiling NinePatch image as our background. And this can be applied to text views and spinners and all sorts of fun stuff too.